Hello, and welcome to our June We Are Power webinar. And this month, we're going to be talking about the introverted leader. What an amazing discussion we've been having behind the scenes in advance of the past weeks about this topic. And we want to provide insights, guidance for our community who are seeking that information about to harness those strengths of that introverted leader. And we always want those actionable insights and top tips that you can take away. So we'll aim to do that during the next 45 minutes of today's discussion. And we really want to hear from you as well. So if you've got any comments, we would like to know. So if you go in the chat, so whether you're joining us on any of the streams that we're providing today, just tell us where you are. Tell us what the weather's like, because we always want to know where that is. We've already had that chat backstage as well. So let us know where you are. And if you've got any questions for our fantastic panel, please do, again, drop it into the chat as well for us, and look forward to having you join our conversation today in that Q&A. But interesting enough, in advance of today's panel, we put a survey out there across our community and found that 70% of those of you out there identified as an introverted leader. But interesting enough, only 10% of those that would say that people would know that they were introverts. So many of us are all hiding it well, hey, I guess. So without further ado, I do want to hand over to our fantastic panel to give a quick hi in who they are, because they give better intros than I could ever do. Chelsea, can I start with you?
Sorry, I've got two screens set up there and I couldn't find my mute button. Hi, thank you so much for inviting me on, Simone. I'm Chelsea and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Innovate Her. So we're a social enterprise on a mission to get girls ready for the tech industry and the tech industry ready for girls. And I am an introvert.
I know, and I'm probably one of those 10% who would not have realised that. So, and the same with you, Irene Apple. Irene, welcome.
Hi, Simone, and again, thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, I'm Irene Apple, and I'm founder and director of Amatrine Coaching and Consultancy. It's a business consultancy and specialising in equality, diversity and inclusion, supporting organisations with developing strategies, understanding inclusion, training senior leaders, training staff, and performing cultural audits to identify where their issues are in the workplace.
Just that small little job, that's all, Irene, that's all.
Yeah, great fun though.
And last but no means least, Carolyn, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely delighted to be here on a topic that's really close to my heart. I work for Barclays. I'm the Chief Controls Officer for Group Technology. I also am passionate about the site that I work at Radbrook Hall in Knutsford, and I also lead career development here on the site as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us and all your introverted best selves. Chelsea, how would you describe an introverted leader?
I think for me, there's a couple of things that I thought about when this question was posed to me. I think the thing that I've realised that I am is quite a reflective thinker. So I can be quite an anxious person as well, and that can make me sometimes act fast on decisions, but that makes me uncomfortable. Because I'm an introvert, I need a bit of reflection time to think about whatever's happening in the decision setting. So I realized that when there's a decision, on the table, I now need to take a step back and really think it through and try and be patient, because that is also something that I'm not. But actually, that is the best way that I can, lead and make decisions for the business. I think also for me, I'm really empathetic and thoughtful in terms of communication with others. And sometimes that can come as a detriment to me. I've been quite a people pleaser in the past, I would say. But actually, empathy is a real skill in leadership. And I think one-to-one conversations with all of my team is really important and something that I really enjoy. Connecting with people on a deeper level is also something that I enjoy. And, that means that then I can have better relationships with the team because you've had that time with them one-on-one. So I think all of those things for me is what makes me a good leader, as well as maybe a little bit more introverted. I think I've had to be, you have to put this extroverted face on sometimes as an introvert, but then go home and lie down for a few hours afterwards because it's quite draining. But yeah, I think those are the empathy, reflective thinking. I think they're the ones that come out for me.
But I do like impatience in there. Somebody asked me a few weeks ago, I was on a panel and it was about superpowers, and it was, what is your superpower? And I was, at first I had sort of this great answer and, you know, all planned. And then, you know what? Actually, I'm impatient. I think that impatience, because you just want to get things done. And you, Chelsea, obviously built a business. So probably we've been in it for probably a similar amount of time, you and I, haven't I? So maybe that's what it is, that impatience is seen, we see it as a superpower, not as something that should ever hold us back. So I must admit, I'm in that embrace my impatient mode right now. Irene, what are the unique strengths that you think that introverted leaders bring to the table? Chelsea's mentioned reflection and empathy, and with a side order of impatience. What do you think that introverted leaders bring?
Do you know, Chelsea's really hit the nail on the head, because that's the things that I was thinking about that being reflective, about taking time. That empathy is a really, really big and important skill in my mind in terms of leadership. And it takes me back to my days in the police when I was a critical incident manager, and I had a team of staff. I had a team of constables and sergeants. And for me, getting the best out of them was about understanding them as individuals, understanding what their ambitions were, where I could support them, and also setting the standards as well, and making sure that they knew where they stood with me, and knew that if they crossed the line that I would take action. And having that kind of upfront, honest conversation, I think, with your team helps them to understand where you're coming from, and you can also understand their needs and their ambitions as well. And I think that empathy piece is really, really important. And I think that's a really big skill of an introverted leader, because I am quite reflective, and I do think about my interactions with people. I step away and think about, well, did that go well? Did it not go well? What could I have done better? And then try and use that information to improve my communication and my interaction with people in the future. So I think for me, that reflection and that empathy really, really are key skills of an introverted leader, because we take time. I like to take time to understand the team, to understand the team dynamics, to understand where we're going. And also the team need to understand where I'm coming from as well, so they know where they stand with me. And I think that consistency and understanding of where they stand with me is also important for the team.
And I think that consistency comes with what you were saying then about that. It's that upfront honesty as well, isn't it? If I'm going to communicate and bring this into my team, then it's that honesty. But you know that I'm going to be consistently honest, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And people need to know where they stand with you as a leader as well. One of the sort of most frustrating bosses and leaders that I've worked for are ones that like blow hot and cold. 1 minute they're like all friendly and all, you know, sort of your best pal, and then the next minute, you know, they ignore you when you're walking down the corridor, and you're like, okay, what have I done? You know, that kind of inconsistency, not knowing where you stand with people. And I find that really, really, really unsettling. And so that's not something that I'd want to bring into the team. I'd like my team to understand where they stand with me and to be consistent in that, so they know what to expect from me, essentially.
And Carolyn, what are some of the, don't like to focus on negatives, but what do you think that the barriers that an introverted leader can face when it comes to building confidence?
Yeah, so the first starting point I would say is sometimes it definitely affected me is the perception of introversion as a weakness. So very often, you know, I'm quite quiet. I am a reflector. I'm a deep listener. I take it all in. I'm not the loudest person in the room, and sometimes that can be perceived, you know, as I say, as a weakness. But then you need to flip that, as Irene said, in terms of your superpowers and your strengths. Because I often will then follow up offline. I'll come back with a proposal, you know, so there's different pros and cons, I would say, to, you know, some of the barriers, but you've got to go look at the barriers and think, how can I turn that on its head and make that into a positive? So one of the things that I did to try and overcome this was seek feedback and mentorship, so people could help me in the room. So building up those one-to-one conversations and relationships offline, and then you know that people have got your back in the room massively has helped me along the journey.
And that's practical, that, isn't it? And that's what we always like to bring into these discussions today is that seeking feedback sometimes. But did you feel brave to do that? Do you think, gosh, I don't know what's going to come back?
Yeah, it was interesting because as you step into leadership, you think, well, the more you practice, the more you're going to get over perhaps some of the confidence wobbles that you have. So the more kind of allyship, sponsorship you can have, and also to help me see my blind and flat spots as well. And also that, you've got this, you can speak up, you can actually have a louder voice in the room, massively enabled me and built the confidence gradually over time. It wasn't an overnight thing. But then, I'm sure we'll get onto this later in terms of how technology has enabled us, and there's different ways now. But when you're kind of in the room and you're too afraid to speak up, but you've got the answer, has always been something I've kind of held myself back. But by having those sponsors, mentors, those people who've got your back in the room and saying, I know you know the answer, I know you're more of the subject matter expert here, but I know you like to reflect and think. So it's kind of got me over a little bit of actually not being the quietest one in the room, but I'm not the loudest, but I'm still being true to myself in terms of my style and way of working as well. And
can I just ask each of you, when did you realize that you were an introverted leader? When did you suddenly went, oh yeah, that is me, I'd not thought of it before? Carolyn?
It was actually as I was kind of thinking about going for that next promotion, which was the step into leadership. I had quite a lot of feedback in terms of, need to speak up more, be more assertive, because I'm quite gentle in nature. I'm the polar opposite of my peer group as well. So I always knew that I was, kind of more reserved, more deep thinker, analytical, in the room. Like I love burying my head in a spreadsheet. And so my coaches and mentors actually highlighted that to me more. I always kind of had a feeling, but they helped me see it for what it is and helped me then put like a tangible plan in place to help me not change myself, but how to overcome it, like tips, techniques, ways to get me comfortable in those environments. But I actually did some personal development where there's lots of self-assessments out there, but there's one called Discovery Insights. And what that really did for me, you get a report at the end of it and it tells you how to work with Carolyn and how not to work with Carolyn. And you actually come out on a chart, and I was bang on right in the middle of Introverted Leader. So if you do know Discovery Insights, I came out bang, blue, green. And that really it was really lovely to read that and really reaffirming to no, this is me. These are my superpowers. And this is what I'm going to build on from there. So if you can get any personal development on kind of understanding yourself and how you tick, that massively helped me.
Love that. Helpful. Chelsea, what about you? When did you identify?
I think I've always known when I've been in like spaces, whether it's a networking event, that I just feel a little bit uncomfortable. And sometimes I know people can hide it and you don't know how people are feeling in the room. But I knew that it wasn't my place, my natural habitat to be in that kind of networking environment. And then as I got into leadership and I started my company at 23. It wasn't just for me around being an introvert and having to go into these spaces where I had to, meet people. It was also like I faced ageism, sexism, all of these different things at once. And then I think I realised a few years after that, and probably only over the last, say, 2 or 3 years, is that being really, and I think Carolyn mentioned it, being true to yourself, being authentic is the best thing that you can do. So now I say that I'm an introvert. A lot of people go, oh my God, I would never realise that. But if you talk about it, doing this webinar subject is amazing. It's making people realize that you can be a leader and you can be authentic and you can be an introvert. I speak about it with my team now as well. And we've done personality tests and things, and we put it all out on the table. And it's really good to have diversity and different people in the team, extroverts and introverts. And I think having that self-reflection over the last few days has just helped me to step into it and really own it rather than, shy away from it, which I definitely did amongst the other things that I was up against when I was a bit younger, just starting out.
It is amazing, because I wouldn't have thought that until I saw you were on the session. I was like, oh wow. And then it makes you think, doesn't it? It makes you think beyond talk a lot about in these webinars across the labels, everything has to have a label, doesn't it? Or have a phrase attached to it, authenticity and, bringing your whole self to work and stuff like that, this introverted leader. But it does sit alongside. And I think the more that this conversation, we're only in the early starts of this conversation, but this is ultimately being yourself, right? This is who you are. And if you're a self-reflector, then you can, suppose, complete any sort of personality test. This is who you are. Irene, you do a lot of public speaking. And so that would, somebody listening who maybe isn't introverted think, well, how does that work? Introverted, how can you get on that stage? Actually, how can the three of you even be on this webinar? How do you deal with that? We've talked about reflection and empathy. So obviously you can do your preparation, but you can't reflect when you're doing a live webinar, or you can't reflect when you're doing a public speak. How do you, give us some of your top tips and hacks?
Oh, goodness gracious. It's never actually come easy to me at all. I mean, you were talking before about when did you find out that you were an introvert? And I found out when I did a master's degree in leadership and did some personality tests. And I thought, I came out as an introvert, and I thought, what? That makes absolute complete sense to me, because everybody was telling me that I'm an extrovert because I'm quite outgoing, I'm quite personable, I'm quite bubbly, I'm quite chatty, I'm sociable. And people would just kept telling me that I was an extrovert, but I didn't feel that way, because when I was in those social situations, I always felt the need to sort of extract myself and to go away and sort of quietly reflect and have some, what I call, contemplate my navel time. And I need that at the end of every day. So going into sort of public speaking, I just basically, it's uncomfortable. And, I don't know anybody who thinks it isn't uncomfortable going into public speaking. And I think for me, it was just a case of continually stepping outside my comfort zone and just pushing myself and pushing myself and pushing myself. And sometimes I came away thinking, oh my God, that was an absolute disaster. Oh my goodness, I couldn't get a word out. I was fluffing what I was saying, nothing flowed. And then other days I'd come out and think, oh, that went really well. But what I always got was consistently great feedback about, oh my God, that was so amazing. You really, touched on some really important points, and it really resonated what you were saying. And I think that confidence probably comes from knowing your subject matter, knowing what you're talking about, living it, knowing it inside and out. And I think that kind of gives you that authority, really, and that confidence to be able to handle yourself in a public speaking situation, and to know that you can answer any questions that are thrown at you. But it's never comfortable. I always have to have kind of like a prep talk with myself before I go onto the stage, and just kind of like pump myself up a little bit, do some deep breathing exercises, and just tell myself, I know this stuff. I know what I'm talking about. I deserve to be here. I deserve to be here. And just having that self-talk to myself just helps me to build that confidence. And then once I'm on the stage and I'm actually talking, all those fears and all those kind of, stresses and concerns just melt away, because I'm in the moment and I'm really, really loving what I'm doing, and I'm loving what I'm talking about and seeing the reaction from the audience. So it's overcoming that initial barrier of saying yes, holding your hand up and going, yeah, I'll do that, and volunteering for it. And then thinking about, oh my gosh, why did I do that? How am I going to do this? And then you just get on with it. Step outside your comfort zone. Talk to yourself if you need to talk to yourself. I do a lot of running, and I do a lot of like gym work, and I often sort of listen to positivity kind of self-help tapes, if you like, when I'm on my run and when I'm in the gym. And that really, really helps my mindset when I'm going to do some public speaking.
So it's almost like the converse, isn't it, of we talk about reflection, it's the pre-reflection and pre-preparation. And I remember, you might not remember this, Chelsea, but you were on a podcast that we did of ours many years ago. I think we was on Northern Power Futures back in the day, and there was something about overcoming public speaking, and you were like preparation, and then a bit more preparation, in advance. Do you still live by that? Is that what you still?
That's so funny that you've said that. Yeah, I definitely prep, but definitely not as much. I think the more like I'm like Irene, if I have to continue to put myself out there. And if I go 6 months without doing a talk or whatever, I'll go right back to the beginning and it will terrify me. And then I'll have to do a lot of prep. But now I'm trying to do more and more talks, so it feels much more natural. Then a lot of the questions are quite similar, but you kind of know what you want to say. It's in your head. You can be more natural. So I think prep at first, if you're like not sure about public speaking, or whatever it is, even if it's for exam or anything, you can apply it to lots of things. I think prepping is really good. But now, yeah, I think when you do it consistently, you just won't need to do that. I think the thing that I've done recently, which really helps me that I want to share, is that when I'm public speaking in person, I always put a video or something in quite early on in my slides. So I might do my introduction and then I might have a little video, even if it's just 30 seconds, because I think that's the hardest bit, that first minute, introducing yourself, you're up there, play the video, you can take a bit of a breather, and then you're much more relaxed. You're in front of everyone anyway, and then you can do the rest of the talk. And I find that is so helpful for me.
I love that because it buys you some time. You're already up there, aren't you? You're already in your sort of your space, and
Yeah.
the video you've chosen is the video that you know and want to high five. I love that. And I just want to pay reference to Anne McManus Hughes in the chat. Absolutely agree with Caroline about people's perception being that an introvert, quieter person is weak. Loud does not always equal strong, and quiet is not weak. Gosh, let's not get into politics for that one. But anyway, I also really understand Chelsea's need to go and lie down after the energy of having to network or step into a loud space. And finally, such great advice there from Irene. Dipping your toes outside of the comfort zone makes it easier every time. It's never easy. It just gets easier. And I always think there's some great performers out there. Is it Robbie Williams? I think he gets dreadfully like kind of stage fright. You know, not saying that he's an introvert, but it's that sometimes it's because you care as well, isn't it? When someone says to me, how are you okay with getting up there and speaking? I said, gosh, well, I'm inadvertently going to probably forget to ask Irene when she be discovered she's an introvert. So thank you for the prompt there, Irene. I think it's that whole element of the nerves or the anxiety will come because you care, because you want to, like Chelsea said, you want to put yourself out there. You want to be part of that conversation. So I think we can give ourselves give ourselves a hard time when we don't need to. And we talked about Chelsea referred to kind of going for that lie down time, but Carolyn, introverts do need that alone time, the reflection time that we talked about today. But how do you put that in harmony with the demands of that leadership role that might need you to be out and about at Danish pastry o'clock or Prosecco o'clock or whatever it may be?
So I feel like hybrid working has massively helped me with this. So a lot of it, again, is about preparation. And I spend a lot of time making sure my week ahead is really planned out well. And it doesn't always go to plan. But hybrid work, and I always try and protect the time at home for that deep thinking, the time I want to bury my head in a spreadsheet. I can't do that in the office. I struggle with noise and distraction anyway. And the time in the office should be when I'm engaging and meeting with people and, spending time with the team. So it's really helped me get that balance. Whereas I suppose before we were in a true hybrid working environment, I did definitely have, I still do have, but not as the extreme as it was, as every day was a drain, that exhaustion, having to, come home every day to like really just, stare at the wall and just chill out for a bit and be in my thoughts. So yeah, I feel like hybrid work has massively helped, but again, it's down to like discipline and structure of how you organize your time. And where you put your energy. So I think that's just one of the biggest critical things. It's now become like my BAU, it's what I do.
And what about you, Irene? I know I see you, a lot of events and we're out in networking spaces. Is that as tricky as it is as you getting onto that stage, or is this something that you've kind of worked with?
Not quite as tricky as getting on stage, but I do find it tricky because, it's funny, I'm just not comfortable in unfamiliar surroundings and unfamiliar situations, and with people that I don't know. And I do have to force myself to go in and make conversations and to sort of, you know, engage with people. And I do find it exhausting, mentally exhausting and draining. And at the end of when I come home from events like that, I do just literally I sit in the garden. I've got a pond and a fountain. I listen to the water flowing, and I just breathe, just take time out and just breathe, listen to the birds singing, and just like sort of bring myself down back to a calm level, because it really, really does. It does make me anxious at times. I'm getting better with it the more I go into these spaces, because I've been in business now for 7 years. I've been doing lots and lots of networking over that time, and it's gotten easier as time goes by because I'm getting more used to it. But I still do find it uncomfortable, and I always need to have that kind of like an hour at the end of the day where I'm just sitting in silence and just sitting, just chilling, really. Sometimes it involves a glass of wine, sometimes not, sometimes just listen to the birds. But I do need that downtime, and I have to have that at the end of every day before I go to bed. Otherwise, I really wouldn't get a good night's sleep, because my mind would be buzzing and kind of trying to process things. So I always have to have that downtime at the end of the day. And because I work for myself, I can find that time, so, which is great.
But sometimes it can work the other way, with that when you do work for yourself, you kind of can't find that time. So you've got to try and manifest it in some other way. You know, Chelsea, someone who has built your business from scratch, and you work particularly specifically across gender equality in the tech industry, which is, you know, still sadly, even with all your efforts and everything you're doing at Innovate Hair, a male dominated industry. How have you kind of managed that? How have you kind of worked your way through that? Because that's involved networking and speaking along the way. But how have you done that as a superpower introvert?
I think it's been one of the toughest things that I've had to deal with, really. As I said before, I faced a lot of ageism in the early days. Like, I was a young girl. I'm quite baby faced anyway. People think I'm much younger than I am still. And a lot of people said to me, like, well, they give me a lot of advice, whether it was a man or a woman, give me a lot of advice that I didn't ask for. And I think at the time I'd be like, oh, great, this is like all like great. I need this advice. I'm young. I like, this is all new to me. But then a lot of the advice wasn't great advice, and then you get too much advice, and you just, I think for me, I think what I've done to cope with, whether it's being in the male dominated world or whether it's my age or gender, is just seeking a really good support network. So I've got an amazing board who are truly diverse, and they have got my back, and they're the people I go to for advice. I've got some non-exec directors who give me one-on-one support. I've got a therapist, I've had a coach, and all of these different things throughout the years has really helped me to advocate for myself in these situations that might not feel comfortable for me. I've been on a couple of boards when, again, like this introverted me, I was like, oh God, I can't speak up, I can't do this. But then all of this, the support that I've had has told me that I am good enough, that I do have a place on the table, and that's given me the confidence to advocate for that and seek value in myself to be on those boards. I was asked to be on them for a reason, right? I also give myself a lot of real talk. Like yesterday, I was having a bit of a panic. I've just come out to Spain for a few months because I remote work, and when I change my comfort zone or change my routine, I can get into a bit of a panic. And me and my boyfriend were giving he was giving me, as well as myself, some really real talk. Like, you do deserve to be here. You will get into a routine, and then whether it's around work, it's like you have 10 to 12 experiences in this now. You've been working so hard on this. You've built a team of 10 people. You've got X amount of money in. It's like, it's reminding myself of all of those things. And I do that not enough. I do it normally when I'm getting to panic mode. But when I am in a good routine, I do have my Friday morning reflections, which I try and stick to. And that's when the real talk comes in. that's when I can, deal with the environments that we're working in, which, are a little bit more challenging. I think leadership as a woman anyway is quite challenging because there aren't as many women leaders. So you are normally in a male dominated environment. So as an introvert, that can be, quite hard. I'm sure Carolyn and Irene can talk to this as well, and you, Simone. But I think advocating for yourself, being real with yourself, giving yourself the pep talks like Irene's talked about, like, are so important for me.
I think that is so important. And I think, I think anyone sort of watching today can kind of go, you know what, why we're not, we go at 1,000,000 miles an hour sometimes, don't we? And I love your Friday morning reflections. I love that because it feels like it's ring fenced and it's intentional and it's what you need to do. And that's part of it's the high-fiving your achievements as well, isn't it? Like the conversation you had with your boyfriend yesterday. It's like, you have done this 12 times. You have achieved this. You have gained this. You've got to high-five those things, haven't you, Chelsea? You, especially all the great stuff that you do and continue to do, that high-fiving.
Oh yeah, you've got to. And I think people forget, especially if you're impatient, you're go all the time. I think as well, when you're empathetic and you take on a lot of people's emotions, I think sometimes it can be really hard to think about how you're feeling and then also look at what you've accomplished, because you're always thinking about other people and what's going on around you. So I think, carving out the time for me is important. And I will be honest, I haven't done my Friday reflections for ages, but I wrote at the start of this week because I could feel my panic coming in. I was like, this is something that I need to set a goal on. I need to start the Friday reflections again. So it'd be nice in Spain to do that.
But equally, you're in Spain. There's a bit of a mañana culture, so it's okay. It's okay that as long as it's tomorrow. As long as it's tomorrow, the day after, you'll be all good.
Exactly.
We've got some nice comments as well here. Rain, it's so reassuring to know that other people also feel that exhaustion and the need there for that alone time after events just to be still and recharge. I never knew others experience this. So thank you so much. And I think that's sharing, it's okay. It's absolutely okay. I've got a LinkedIn user as well. My experience has been similar, working from home during COVID enforced lockdowns explain why I've been so exhausted my entire career. I'm so much better at having some work from home time than being permanently office based. It's great. You're not alone. No one's alone here. There's always someone I feel like you can reach out to and ask. And Chelsea, you gave a great example of how you've navigated your sort of adventures, if you like, by having those you've had therapists, you've got mentors, you've got one-to-one advice, you've got your board. There's one size fits all, is there, for anyone? But it's just throwing that in is great. It's not just as easy as doing this. Carolyn, have you got any sort of hacks or top tips for our introverted leaders to use as they sort of develop their leadership styles?
I really resonate with everything Chelsea and Irene have said. It's funny, it's like I'm listening to myself back on a number of the key points that you mentioned. So for me, there's a couple of things. So structure, I have to practice, prepare for everything. That's just the way I operate. So structure is always a big one for me. I've reading the room, knowing the agenda. So, if you're feeling uncomfortable, don't be afraid to ask. You'll always hear me say about knocking on open doors. And I don't know why, but some reason we hold back and sit there worrying and panicking about some of these things, but knocking on open doors, asking for more information. What's the purpose of the meeting? Who's going to be there? What's the tone of the meeting? What's the agenda? And then practicing as well. We talked about public speaking. For me, if you met me 8 years ago, I was an absolute nervous wreck on public speaking. So the more I practiced, the better I became. So that repetition of doing it. But what was interesting is a mentor really helped me and said, right, don't just do one type, do multiple. So we come up with a plan, whether it was virtual, in person, a video recording, and having different breadth and depth of the different types of public speaking that I was getting hung up on. But again, not one person can help you get over that. So I've got lots of online help with public speaking as well. I mean, there's a fabulous plethora of tips on TikTok, which my daughters introduced me to. And I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant. I can self-learn really quickly. But then the other thing as well is just surrounding yourself with diverse range of mentors, coaches. I have, people I go to if I need to just vent. like event buddy, and then I have people where I have more structured feedback. And I try and pick people that are quite different to me. So I'll have people that can resonate with me and share similar situations, but I do try and target people that are different to me as well, to just help me see things differently. And also learn from their lessons, get their hints and tips. So, but to Chelsea's point, the one thing that I have learned a lot from that audience of people that have helped me is 9 times out of 10, it's me being hard on myself. So, my husband will often say to me, has somebody told you that, or is that just something you've got in your head? 9 times out of 10, it is.
Love that. And Irene, you were the first ever Black female inspector in the history of Merseyside Police. How did you navigate that as an introvert? What are your top tips? What did you glean from there that you can pass on? Because just while you're reflecting, Stephanie, thanks so much for this session. It's been very helpful, and there was lots I identified with. Thanks to the speakers for being so open and sharing their experiences. So what you're saying really matters. But what did you hack along the way, Irene?
For me, it was about, well, first and foremost, it's about knowing your own skill set, knowing what you're good at, knowing what your strengths are, and also know what your weaknesses are as well. And I think what I found most helpful was making sure I had a voice and making sure that I used my voice. I mean, because I have to say, I was became known as a bit of an agitator when I saw things that weren't quite right, or, sort of policies that weren't quite right, or that this is where my equality and diversity passion really came to the fore. I'd stand up and speak about it. And I think the reason why I was listened to was because I proved that I was a hard worker. I worked hard. I went over and above and beyond, worked probably harder than most of my colleagues, because you have to keep proving yourself. Because when you're Black, or when you're from a minority, and I came from 2 minorities, Black and female, you do have to keep proving yourself over and over and over again, because there's that presumption of incompetence, never mind on top of being an introvert and having to push yourself outwards all the time as well. So I think for me, it was about knowing what my inner strengths were, setting myself goals, because I had clear goals for where I wanted my career to go when I was in the police, and making sure I studied and worked hard, and just making sure that I used my voice for good. And what I did used to do, what I found helpful for me in helping to sort of build my confidence, was mentoring and coaching others who were experiencing things in the workplace that that wasn't good. And I felt helping others help me in a strange sort of way. And I think surrounding myself or finding critical friends, people that you trust, people that you value the opinion of, and seeking out their feedback, and having those critical friends around you. And of course, having the love of your family and friends around you as well, because sometimes you have really, really dark days and you think, oh my God, I'm just not in the right place. I'm not in the right space. I'm never going to get where I want to get to. And then you just need that kind of arm around you, and that, that hug, and go, you'll be all right. You'll be fine. Just keep going. Sometimes you just need that reassurance. And then other times you may need someone to say, actually, well, you didn't handle that situation very well, and maybe you could think about doing it this way. So having that kind of critical friend as well, I think, is really important. And I did have those voices, people that I wouldn't have thought would have been my allies in that role, in that workplace, but actually were real allies. So yeah, making sure that you sort of have that kind of critical friend, that mentorship, that wrap the arm around your shoulder, that comfort, and sort of, really getting to know yourself and what your strengths are, and the areas where you need to develop, and then going to work on those areas of development. And that's the way you navigate through. But you've got to make sure you have a voice. Don't sit back and just be quiet, which is what we naturally want to do as introverts, is just sit back and look around and reflect. And you can do that to a degree, but when you're in that leadership position, you do have to speak, you do have to have a voice, you do have to, sort of stand up and be heard. So yeah, it's make sure that your voice is heard. And if you've got something to say, make sure that you say it.
And just continue on the top tips, Caroline, sort of delegation, that it's definitely a challenging sort of skill to do. But what's your top tips? We're in that top tips phase as we're in the last few minutes of our webinar, so I want to try and get as many of these as possible. So top tips for delegating for starters.
Yeah, so for me, first of all, obviously getting to know your team, building out that trust, building out the relationship. But I would say, and it's interesting, I've kind of been through this cycle this last year, starting a new role. Delegating gradually, so building the relationship up at the same time. So you're building trust in the relationship, but also you're still learning. And I mentioned about being structured, and you want to learn as well. So for me, it's definitely delegate gradually.
Delegate gradually, I like that. And Chelsea, what's about top tips about sort of drawing on the strengths of your team?
I would just say the biggest thing that I've learned and the best thing that I've ever done in the business is to foster an inclusive environment. I think everyone in my team is different. They all have different needs. Some of them are new parents, some of them are older parents, some of them have got multiple kids, some of them have no kids but have caring responsibilities. Some of them like to work at night time. Some of them like to work in the mornings. There's a real varied mix of people in my team. And I think what I've learned to do to get the best out of them, whether they're introverted or extroverted, is to, one, be transparent with them. We all do these personal guides where at Innovate Her when we first start, and it's like, I've got one here actually, it's like conditions I like to work in, things I need, things I struggle with, and we always talk about those first, so you're clear on who that person is and what and when they like to work. And then I think just making the environment safe and inclusive for them to be truly who they want to bring to work. They don't have to be themselves if they don't want to. They don't have to tell you everything. I think it's just fostering that really inclusive environment. For me as a leader, that's the most powerful thing that you can do.
And as we go into our final sort of question, one for everyone, what's the one thing that we think organisations can do out there? They can lead on what Chelsea's doing at Innovate Her. What's the one thing that organisations and leaders can do out there to really make sure that we're benefiting from the skills and superpower of introverted leaders? Irene, I'll come to you first.
For me, it's that inclusion piece, about being able to have those open and honest conversations, being able to value people for the different style that they have, different way of thinking that they have. And that's what true inclusion is about, isn't it? True inclusion is about valuing the person that they are, and listening to them and valuing their views and opinions. So for me, the what organizations can do is be more inclusive. And that's a simple thing for me.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Very similar to Irene, fully wholeheartedly agree with that about, knowing your people, knowing what makes them tick, but bring other things in, like technology is a massive enabler. So for me, absolutely the best thing that's happened for me is Teams and the raising your hand. So leveraging opportunities like that so people can speak up or use the chat. There's so many different ways now to invite people into the discussion and get their views differently.
Brilliant. And last word from you. So not internally Innovate Her, Chelsea, but externally to orgs.
I think as a leader in any business, if you have the empathy and understanding of what's going on around you in the business, whether that's at a meeting or more widely, and like Carolyn said, bringing people into that conversation, whether it's through different means, I think is really important. If you see, or lead a meeting, we say this a lot, don't we? But you lead a meeting, just making sure that everyone has a voice in some way, that not one person is overpowering the conversation. I think there's just small things I think that leaders can have, even just like on their screen, if it's virtual or written in their notebook. It's like a checklist. Remember to include everyone. I just think that's so simple.
I always write down before any webinar or any round table or anything I'm doing, I have everyone's name handwritten down, and it's almost like, right, who hasn't spoken, or has everyone been represented? It's silly things, isn't it? Like really simple things. Thank you all, our superheroes, our introverted superheroes. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to all of you for your comments in the chat. Final one, the self-criticism is an enormous point. It's part of the reflections that comes with introversion, also because of your reflective superpower that you're identifying issues ahead of others in the room. It can be uncomfortable until the point where everyone else is caught up. So great what you've inspired today, Chelsea, Carolyn, and Ireland, is reflection. I love some of my takeaways today. It was about seeking feedback. Seek feedback about you. Make sure, I love delegate gradually. I love the Friday morning reflections. I love having an event buddy. I think ultimately there's a piece around surrounding yourself with the right people, surrounding yourself with people to be able to help you. Value inclusivity, organizations out there. If not now, when? It's up to you. Thanks all of you for joining us today. I've really enjoyed. If you're watching on catch up, please drop us a note and tell us that you enjoyed us. That's why tech is for good, so we can part great conversations like today. Thanks all of you. Thank you to Chelsea, Carolyn, and Irene. Thank you for all of you joined the chat today. We look forward to seeing you in our next event. Thank you all for joining. Stay connected on everything we do. Our digital hub, wearepower.net. Take a breath.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.